Seth, welcome on B2B Podcast Stories. Great to have you.
How's it going, buddy? How you doing?
Great to have you. Loving the Philly accent, loving a bit of that.
I'm loving the Sean Connery accent. The Sean Connery of podcasting.
Oh, apparently so. I'm glad I still have the Scottish accent in me. The girls love it, so
There you go.
it definitely helps. I do a Braveheart impression as well. So, Seth, tell us
Take our
about...
freedom.
Exactly. So I'm glad everyone understands the Braveheart reference. That's It's cool. So tell me, Seth, tell me about your podcast. What is it all about? And what is it at today? I see you're over 205 episodes. That's amazing.
Yeah, shocking. But it started out as a pandemic podcast project. I've been podcasting since 2010, doing various podcasts. But this one was kind of been an entrepreneur since 2008. And I was kind of like, well, let me start pontificating about my experiences. Well, that got boring really fast. So I restarted the podcast at episode 11. Made that episode 1, and then kind of dove into interviewing people. I'm a former journalist, so it kind of made sense that I could interview people, talk about their entrepreneurial journey. So Entrepreneurs Enigma was born during the pandemic, 2001-ish, beginning 2001. And we've had pretty big names on the podcast. Guy Kawasaki, Rand Fishkin. I mean, some other names escape me, but we've had some pretty big names and some not so well-known names, but the high-power players. We had Brian Kramer actually on the program, which was fun. You call them not from Porto. So you call them from Portugal, which was kind of cool. So
Super cool.
It's fun. So it's about the journey of entrepreneurship and the ups and downs that everyone faces, because everyone thinks, oh, it's overnight success. It's overnight success 10 years in the making. Everyone's like, it was not as fast as it looks. It really isn't. I'm 16 years into Goldstein Media, my main hustle, and it is not an overnight success. You know, people might say, oh, you're being so successful now. I'm like, I'm still rocking and rolling, and if there's every day's a struggle somewhere. There's always a struggle bus, that kind of thing. So, gotta do it.
100%. I see you've had Ian Truscott on. He was a guest previously with us as well. So indeed, some really big names. How do you get Guy Kawasaki on your show? This is Rich Dad Poor Dad, right?
I actually I talked to his friend, who's a lawyer that I had on the podcast. I met him through Lunch Club, which is like a networking event. Had him on the podcast. He's like, hey, Guy Kawasaki should be on this program. I'm like, do you know him? He's like, yeah, I'll email him right now. And he emailed him. Guy's like, sure. I'm like, Guy Kawasaki's on my program. That was the most nerve-wracking interview possible.
I can imagine. He's walked off shows before. I remember there's a clip of him like walking off podcasts that are like underprepared as well. So he's quite a tough cookie.
Tough cookie. He's a good guy. But it was like my podcast is 15, 20 minutes. Same 3 questions. I always tell them, I'm not going to give them to you, but if you listen to the show, you'll be prepared. And then it's like, we choose the fat for the beginning. And then, we just talk for the beginning, first 10 minutes, and then we go into the 3 questions, and then we're done. Nice and easy,
Interesting
we
format.
don't have them. Exactly. It's easy. We don't have a Mossad, guy editing our stuff for us. We do it all ourselves.
I feel targeted. What about Digital Marketing Dive? What's that all about? You have 2, right? You've got 86 episodes there as well.
Yeah, that was the one we did. I did 3 seasons of that prior to Entrepreneurs Enigma, and that was fun. Yeah, I always had a co-host. Every season was a different co-host, different collaborator with me, and that was fun. We had Rand on that as well, and we had some pretty big names on the digital marketing side, but it kind of got stale after a little while, and like 86 episodes fine. We put it on the Marketing Podcast Network, so it's still up there, and we might come back to it at some point, but it was just like, I can only do one podcast at a time. And run a business, and run a newsletter. I run the marketingjunto.com newsletter, which is a marketing newsletter every Wednesday. So I have a lot of irons in the fire.
So I mean, coming back to 206 interviews on the Entrepreneurs Enigma podcast, and some big names in there, like we said as well. What has been like the progression of finding guests to come on the show? The typical journey that most podcasters go through is that at the very start, they're cold emailing, they're cold messaging, maybe they're tapping into their network, But then very quickly it becomes into its own flywheel, right? You start getting guests recommending other guests. You get people reaching out to you. Some people form these
We have you
alliances with
guys
different.
emailing us all the time. Wink,
Yeah.
wink, wink.
You have some people form alliances with PR agencies, and they're just bringing them
Yeah,
guests all the time. Like, what
I
was that
love it.
like from the start to today? What was that progression
From the
like?
start, I always had a big network because I've been at this for 16 years. So I just tapped my network. I went in there and said, "Hey, will you be on my show? Will you be on my show? Will you be on my show?" And everyone was always like, "Sure." For publicity, to get a clip, to get seen. No one. Everyone likes to talk about themselves. Every once in a while, you get someone who wants to talk about themselves, but they have like one-word answers, and you're like, "Oh my god, it's like pulling teeth." But ultimately, then people start finding you. Like you guys found us and you said, "Hey, would you like to have this person on or have this person on?" And sometimes they're the right fit, sometimes they're not. And then it's sort of like just gotta figure stuff out, And then eventually, there's a flywheel where it's you're known, and you can say like, "Yeah, Entrepreneurs Enigma does not have a very big listenership." But of the listeners, there's maybe like 30, 40 people listen to it every episode or listen to an episode per episode, unless I put it into something like Malpod and then it advertises for me, which is a really neat service. But ultimately, it just, you don't have to be a huge podcast to make it successful. A lot of people are like, "Oh, I want to be, Tim Ferriss or I want to be Joe Rogan." You're not going to be. You're just not going to be. If you can get 100 listeners a week to your podcast, it's awesome. But you have to find out another way. If you're trying to make it big in podcasting, it's not going to work for you. If you want to use podcasting as a tool beyond other people's podcasts as a marketing tool, have your own podcast as a marketing tool. That's how podcasting needs to work. People say podcasting's dead. It isn't. It's not NPR, which is National Public Radio here in the States. It's not the BBC. It's not buttoned up. And honestly, podcasts are too buttoned up, you can tell. There's no ums or ahs in there. It's like, well, that's not natural. It's a conversation, and people listen to the conversations, and they're fun because there's gaffes. People fall off their chairs, microphones go off. It's like, what the heck happened here? You have to have a good editor, or you have to be a good editor to put up with the craziness. So,
Yeah, I mean, a couple things you touched there. One of the guys that was one of our very early podcast coaches, Mike Richard, who was actually the first guest on this show as well. But he was a good friend of ours from the previous show that we had. And one of the things he said was like, imagine you had 100 people in a room in front of you listening to you every single week. That's what
terrifying.
having that 100%. So actually, that's a great point. Never thought of it like that. Podcast is a great way to get over the social anxiety of having 100 people in front of you, yet still having 100 people in front of you. But imagine having 100 people listening to you every single week. We scoff at 100 downloads a week, but if that's 100 consistent people, you're in their ear for 20 minutes in your case, up to an hour in other cases, every single week.
Yeah.
Like, that's gold dust in a lot of instances as well. But I think
It
just
is.
because social media is so
Brand
massively scalable, I think we scoff a little bit at 100 downloads, which in the grand scheme of things isn't that much, but put it in perspective, is huge.
Yeah, I mean, if one person converts into a customer or or knows your name because you have a podcast that they enjoy listening to, it's great because it turns into an eventual deal, or they know someone who knows someone who knows someone who knows someone, and then you eventually get so far down the line that you don't know how they found you, but you assume it's from something you did. So
Now, you mentioned their podcasting as a marketing tool. So tell us
Yes.
about the different ways that you've experienced podcast as a marketing tool.
Well, first of all, it's brand awareness. It's getting out in front of people, having content. Making content's a pain that took us. It's a pain. It's a real pain. So if you're doing a podcast you enjoy, there's content. You can clip it up, put it in Minvo, or whatever they call themselves lately. It used to be Memento, now it's Minvo or Cast Magic or any of these other tools. And it cuts up your stuff for you. Finds good clips that you might not normally find, and post them on social media before your podcast and say, this is coming up on X day and all that stuff. But as a marketing tool, it's great because it's brand awareness, number one. It's also a way to get in front of people that you want to be clients with you, or you want to work with, or they want to work with you. Either have them on as guests, or they know about you and they're like, well, this guy knows his stuff, I want to hire him to do XYZ. Or it's just a good way to have a reason to reach out to people. Like if you want to talk to Guy Kawasaki, well, that's a bad example because I had to know someone who knows Guy Kawasaki because Guy Kawasaki is Guy Kawasaki. I'm getting really good at saying his name really fast too. Um, but like Rand Fishkin, you can reach out to him, and Rand is the most amazing guy out there, and have him on the show. And I'd have a reason. I mean, I know him for years. We're both in the same industry. But most people, he'll go on your show if he's like, "Hey, your podcast. I'd love to talk to you about what I'm doing with Spartoro," or he's a game development company. He's developing a game right now, which is kind of cool. So,
No, indeed.
multiple ways to market it.
So 100%. I mean, even Guy Kawasaki, maybe if you had said, "Hey, Guy, can I have a 15-minute coffee with you?" He probably would have not replied to your message, even if that was through a friend of a friend, right? But it was like, "Hey, Guy, let's have a win-win scenario here. I'd love to talk to you, pick your brain, get your input on these 3 questions that I ask all my guests, but you have a very unique perspective." Unless he said, "Hey, go into debt." I'm sure that was the answer to at least one of those 3 questions, was it not? Okay.
I plead the fifth. I plead the fifth.
Have to listen to the episode to find out. It's smart marketing. So, I mean, like just being able to have that 15 to 20 minute conversation, like you wouldn't have had that if you didn't have the podcast, most likely, right?
Yeah.
Because with all due respect, who are you in front of Guy Kawasaki? But you, with a podcast, is someone to Guy Kawasaki.
There's some value there.
Exactly.
There's some value there.
There's an exchange of value. I think that's a very important way of putting it. That's a great way of putting it for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's super cool. I think that's typically what we say is there's 3 main benefits to having a podcast. One is definitely the brand awareness that you get from it,
Yes.
from the podcast itself. The other one is as a content machine for your social media, for your other acquisition channels. We always say that you can't have a podcast by yourself. You need to have a podcast and then a way to market your podcast. That could be through a specific social media channel. Correct. Because the algorithms aren't really going to push you that much until they see that you're getting external traction from somewhere else. And then, indeed, like you said there, as a means of reaching out to potential clients and saying, "Hey, come on my show," and then being able to build rapport with them. Hopefully by the end of the podcast, they know you, they like you, and they trust you. If they don't, then you have bigger issues to start with, right? So then maybe the podcast was
go
the
back
problem.
to the drawing board a little bit on that one.
Exactly. But if it's just like, "Hey, look, I know I have something of value, and I know that if I could just get into a room with these people, I'd be able to build some trust and rapport." Podcast is a great means to reach out to them and say, "Hey, look, come on the show and let's have an interesting conversation." And
what's worse is like they don't become a client, whatever, you have a contact. You can let them on LinkedIn, they follow you, you follow them. You never know when it's going to come down the road and they need your services. So
100%. Last week's guest, Tom, said something really interesting as well, where he said, "Look, it's also just a great way that you build out your network and your contact list, but then as a way for you to give value to the next guest. Like you're on the show right now. If you're like, "Hey, I've really been struggling with this," I can say, "Oh, hey, I know a guy called Mike. Let me put you in touch." There's an instant way that I can provide you value as well, which
it's a relationship play.
100%. And in the grand scheme of the universe, the more you give, the more you get back. You shouldn't give to take, but you should know that by giving is a really good way to get as well out of the world.
It's good karma. Yeah.
It's good karma indeed. So if there's any way, Seth, if I can help you at all, if you have any specific problems, please do let me know. More than happy to use our contact as well to help you out.
Same here, buddy.
As well.
Same here.
Super cool to know that as well. So tell me more about like how you managed to stay consistent with 206 episodes, especially with the viewership didn't really cross like 100 committed. I'm sure there's more than that. I'm sure you're being very humble right now, but a lot of people feel a little bit unmotivated, demotivated by the fact that look, I've done 200 episodes and this is all that's grown. I'm seeing Seth Rogen. He's at 1,000. If I look at my trajectory, I'm not going to hit that number. I'm not going to hit anything interesting by the time we get to 1,000 episodes. What's kept you motivated if it wasn't the viewership?
It's the connections I make. It's the networking. I'm very big on networking. My whole business, Goldstein Media, has been based on being a networker and meeting people and connecting with them in that way. So that's the reason why I do this. It's secondary. I hate to say this, but my listeners are secondary. I'm using it as a business acquisition tool, as a reason to chat with somebody who's like, "Oh, I know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody." Yeah, that's the reason why I do this. I mean, originally I started because I wanted something to do during the pandemic in addition to my business. But it morphed into this. I was like, how can I make this worth it? More worth it? Because, I mean, I'll be perfectly honest. I mean, even NPN, the Marketing Podcast Network, it's great to be on the network and have some ads, which makes it more legitimate and stuff. I'll tell you right now, I ain't making bank on NPN. I mean, Jason Falls will be the first one to admit it. We're not making bank, but let's all get $300 every 3 months or something like that. But whatever. I'll then boost something on Malpine or something like that. So it's worthwhile. I mean, it's good because the camaraderie, you learn together, you grow together, and so being on a network's nice.
100%. So tell us a little bit about Goldstein Media. So you guys are a digital marketing agency. You guys do SEO, web design, social media, email marketing. So tell us more about the agency itself. How did that get started?
Well, that got started because I was a journalist for 6 years out of college. I went to the University of Delaware. Burned out on that massively. Had been doing websites on the side as a side hustle since '98. My wife was like, well, you need to do something else. And I'm like, thanks, wife. So she's like, why don't you get, you've been doing websites on the side. Why don't you make it, we start a business, we get things rocking and rolling. Do this to get a job. Because you need the experience to get the job. How you get the experience instead of, getting a job, the cyclical kind of thing. So that was 16 years ago, and I'm still doing Goldstein Media. I had a brief stint in corporate America when my son was born in 2012, 2013. Learned I do not like corporate America. Sorry, guys, not a big fan of corporate America. Not a fan of corporate anything. I mean, honestly, Goldstein Media, we do not work with corporate clients because they might be big money, but they are a pain to work with because everything's done by committee. Everyone has to check things off. Things are slow. I'm much rather deal with the SMBs, more mid-sized businesses, but definitely not corporations, enterprise. Not my cup of tea.
Yeah, I can understand. So the job never came at the end of it. It became a job or a business.
It became a job. It became a career, and I love every minute of it. There's ups and downs. The whole podcast is about that. The ups and downs of entrepreneurship. There's years that I don't make that much. I'd be better off working in corporate America. There's other years I'm making bank, and I'm like, that's great, So they kind of offsets themselves, and it works.
No, 100%. That's the thing about entrepreneurship that I think a lot of people maybe don't, especially when you go from the job side to the entrepreneurship side, is the stress tolerance you need to be able to manage the ups and downs. I think that's been my experience, at least. I came from corporate America on the European side, but it was an American company as well.
Oh, so you came actually from corporate America, corporate America Europe, yeah.
Corporate America Europe and Asia, actually. I did a year in Japan with
EMA.
corporate America.
That's
Asia
cool.
Pacific, indeed. And so I can understand, like, there's the stability. It's really nice to just have that paycheck.
There's not stability anymore either. There's no stability anymore. There's no gold watch at the end of the rainbow at these jobs anymore.
Indeed, but then at the same time, entrepreneurship's it's I mean, me and my business partner, Guillaume, what we say always to each other is our business is a direct reflection of our mental well-being, our mental state, right?
It is.
So a lot of the
mental
time,
health is huge.
we need to look after our mental health to look after the business. And we hold each other accountable for that. We say to each other, look, man, I think you need a break. I'm happy to carry a bit more load for now. Guillaume said it to me. I've said it to him. And say, look, we need to be fully switched on to be top-notch in our business as well.
Exactly.
But that's stress tolerance.
You need to know when to take a break.
Yeah, because you don't know when the next paycheck is going to come. You don't know if the next one's going to be as big as this one. You could lose a client tomorrow, and then that instantly impacts you. Like, you don't have you've got all the risk and all the reward in a way, and it's
the ultimate amount of commission. It's it's commission. You eat what you kill, or you eat what you service. You don't kill your
100%.
clients. That would be kind of counterproductive.
Well, it depends what business you're in. I'm sure in SaaS and business,
true.
that's kind of the idea as well, right?
You don't want to kill your clients. You want to kill their kill your clients. You're still kind of not getting paid. So
there's euthanasia business, some parts of Europe. There you go. So look, there's always
you do kill your client.
Then you do kill.
That went dark really fast.
So I'll tell you a little bit of a story about that. So our other podcast, Seth, is Corporate Treasury 101. It's all about corporate treasury. So we work a lot with corporate America because treasury departments only exist in large companies. We know the struggle of the approval committees and everything there as well. Having worked in corporate America, we kind of know how to jump the hoops, I guess, as well. So it's all about treasury, and it's all about financial risk management and everything like this. And that's kind of what we've done 200 plus episodes in somehow. And
somehow, exactly.
Yeah, we've met fans of the show, at conferences. We've had fans of the show that reached out and then had them as guests and all that. And one of them said to me, "Man, Hussam, that episode you did where you went through the example of a drug dealer and how they managed their cash Like that stuck with me. And I was like, man, I completely forgot about that. That was like episode 60. Completely forgot about that. So you never know. These tangents, people do appreciate them as well. So
Exactly. So occasionally you do kill your clients.
so occasionally there's a business out there where that is necessary indeed. That is also people. So trying to keep it less morbid.
That's morbid, yeah.
Come back to Goldstein Media for me, Seth, where you don't kill your clients and you help your clients make
we
money.
love our clients. We do not kill our clients. We make them money. Exactly.
100%. So what's been the relationship with the podcast and the agency? So you mentioned one of those was mainly the client acquisition, right?
Yeah.
Ballpark it for us. How many clients have you gotten at your podcast?
Like 2 or 3. I mean, it's not a lot. It's more the connections, and maybe I've gotten more indirectly from, not directly from the client, from the guest, and then got clients from the guest to say, hey, go talk to Seth, than directly the guests themselves. So of the guests themselves, I've got 2 or 3 that have become clients of mine because they are interested in what I do. Others, I do know a few that have come from the podcast saying, hey, I follow this because Brian Kramer is on the show. And I realized, hey, I want to, I need what you offer, Seth. Let's go. I mean, it's very soft pitch. At the very end of the show, it says, Goldstein Media hopes you enjoyed this episode. It's the only time it's branded for Goldstein Media. Until then, it's all Entrepreneurs Enigma. I also picked a really hard word to spell, as you can see from my hat. I put an extra R in there, and I had to carve it out of my hat. Because you can't, entrepreneurs in Great Armo would appreciate that. It's French.
Yeah.
And they like to put extra letters and stuff.
It's awful. And half of them are silent.
No.
We have this debate.
But you also put U's in color. So.
Hey, okay, look, it's English from England. Okay, I'm gonna pick this brain right now with the American on the show. All right, like English originated in England, so I think whatever we say is right. I mean, you guys need to have. There's a really funny. There's a really funny. Hey, okay, we like our tea as well. Right? Then there's the Scottish. We barely speak English. Trust me, we've adopted it from them as well.
You're like our Louisiana.
Exactly, 100%. Louisiana of the UK. So there's a really funny skit by Michael McIntyre about the American English words of British English. So it's things like what we call pavement, you call sidewalk. We call like trash can, or we call it, a bin. You'll call it like waste paper basket or something like this.
Yeah, no,
like,
we'll call it trash can.
You have to be like incredibly descriptive of all of the words that you use, as if the word pavement.
You also use some pretty offensive words from some innocuous things, like the FAG is a cigarette. Let's not get started on. And next Thursday.
Touche.
See, next Thursday is not as offensive over there as it's a greeting. The word a greeting over there. In terms of endearment over here, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe you said that.
See you next Thursday. That's offensive.
No.
What's that?
The C word.
The C word. Oh, okay, yeah.
Next Thursday, yeah.
Hey, look, I mean, that's Australian as well. The Australians love the C word. The British don't really mind the C word. Like, I mean,
Americans, we got our panties in a bunch. We came from the Puritans. Go figure.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay, let's get back to podcasting, Seth.
Back to podcasting.
So, I completely agree with you. So you've got the direct customer acquisition. I mean, I can be very straight as well. Like this podcast itself, of the past 11 guests that are live at the point of recording here, 2 of them already turned into clients. Right. Wow. So like we're already up there as well in terms of the conversion. Now it was quite early. A lot of them were kind of part of our network. We kind of knew already. We got them on the show and we were able to close them very soon afterwards. Indeed. Yeah. Podcasting, I mean, if it's not directly just a way of reaching out to say, hey, look, here are my services, at the very least, it makes you likable. Yes. And it gets the person to know you. I mean, I think we all know, especially if you're selling something of value, we like to think that we're selling something of value in general. Yeah. What we feel like we fall short on is people don't know that what we have is valuable, right? So especially if you have something valuable, and I think a lot of the time with us, especially Guillaume and I, our personalities is what makes us valuable as well. Like people like working with us, we like working with people, we enjoy what we do, we're very passionate about podcasting. I see that with you as well. You're a very personal person, Seth. I think the more I get to know you, the more I'm like, oh yeah, I do want to know what Seth is offering, and I'd love to work with Seth. Because a lot of the time,
Oh,
especially when
great.
you're a business owner, you realize it's not just the service, it's who you're working with as well.
Mm-hmm.
And how easy are they to work with? How likable are they to work with? And a lot of the time, when you're running your own business, you you care who you're working with. You care the person on
Yes,
the other side of it. You care, can
absolutely.
I trust this person? Does this whole person hold values that
No,
I
like and
hold?
trust factor. Yeah.
100%. And that's that kind of rapport. Podcasting is a great way to do it. Now you can do that over time. And what you said there was really interesting as well. It's not just through the guests that you have on the show. Of the 200 episodes, if 100 people are listening to, I've listened to, let's say 60%
Uh-huh.
of those 200 episodes, 200 plus episodes that you have, those people know you. You might not know
Yeah.
those people. Have you ever met a fan? Like,
Oh my
randomly?
God. Yeah. I mean, I all the time. In the local area, people are like, "Seth, I listened to your podcast." Like, you did? Okay, great. Wow. Oh, well, that's kind of unnerving.
And then
Fantastic in
and
its
then they're
own way.
like, Seth, how's it going? You moved house. How was that? And you're like, why do you know
Yeah.
that I moved house? Are you stalking me? It's like, no, no, no. That person knows you. That person has
They
listened
know you exactly.
to,
They trust you. Know, like, and trust. Exactly.
they've listened to 100 hours of you, Seth, on
That's
average,
terrifying.
right? Like
For
100
anybody,
hours.
anyone who wants to listen to 100 hours of Seth, God bless them. Bless their hearts, as they say
Yeah.
down in the South.
And but they know you, right? And a lot of times
Yeah.
we speak to podcasters. I mean, most people that have been in the show are around the same age range as you, the 200 plus mark with their podcast.
Yeah.
And they say, like, when I meet fans, like, they come up to me as if they know me. And there's a very, like, weird one-sided relationship here that's almost there, that person knows you and they treat you like they're familiar with you. And like they're like this,
Because they are.
which they are. And you're not familiar
But
with
you're not
them.
familiar with them. You don't know them from Adam.
And it's a really weird relationship that you build.
It
But
is.
the business mind of that is that person knows you. They mean what you your
Exactly.
business as well. So even if you don't know them, people listening to you, they're getting to know you, and they build that know, like, and trust with you just from listening to so many hours of it
Very
as well.
important. Very important. But that's probably the most important thing about the podcasting is that it's the no, like, and trust factor. Absolutely.
Another thing, I think it's something that actually you and I are more appreciated from guests on this show, which is also, by the way, one of the beautiful things about having a podcast is how much you learn. It's like even on a topic that you're an expert on, like we're a podcast agency. We run podcasts, we manage podcasts for clients, we've had our own podcasts. We still learn about podcasts from talking to other podcasters on this show. One thing that a couple of our guests have said now is that as soon as they sign clients, they bring them on the show as also like an instant value proposition to them as well, to say, hey, look, come on the show.
Clever, yeah.
You get some exposure, especially digital marketers, right? You get some exposure
Yeah.
at my thing, and we get to build more rapport as well. And
Yeah, it's a good idea. I haven't done that, yet. I'm getting pickier and pickier and pickier with who I have on because I'm like, this is the demand. And I'm like, personal injury lawyers, nothing against them, but I don't. I get entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial because they're ambulance chasers, but not really the person I want to talk to. Like,
Yeah.
I want to talk to the entrepreneur who's in the high tech sector or who's in the healthcare sector who's doing different fun, wacky things. So that's a journalist to me. Is there a story there?
Yeah, 100%. That's an interesting lesson as well for listeners. How do you, at the start, you can't be picky, right? I guess that's
you
not
gotta be
really.
everybody, yeah.
You got to take everybody. You need to fill up the docket. I mean, one of the golden rules of podcasting is don't miss a week, right? Be consistent. Like
Just
you miss
get
a week,
started.
it becomes two. Just get started. Get people on. Start having the conversations. As you mature in your podcasting career, I guess you understand what your avatar is. Like, who are you actually trying to talk to? What was that journey like for you? Where did you start, and how did you kind of figure out who it was you wanted on the show?
It's kind of interesting because I'm very well connected in the marketing space and in the entrepreneur space. And I was like, I knew people who I could get on. Like, even some big names, I knew I could get them on. But then it was more like, but I didn't have the strategy of like, because those people who I can get on are not necessarily their fodder. I mean, in the nicest way possible, but they're fodder for getting more people listening to the show. But they're not necessarily converted to clients for me. But they're gonna be a good conversation. But then there's ones that are good clients for me that I want to talk to, that makes sense. And it's like, so eventually build up the courage, the gonads to actually ask people to be on your show that you don't know right off the bat. So that works out well. It's kind of to grow up here, honestly. It's like being more eloquent, but yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. You gotta step out. You gotta be able to ask, right?
The more times they say no or not right now.
Hmm.
And no saves you time, and not right now means check with them in a month.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and that's a business lesson, I'm sure. I mean, what
Yeah,
have
it's like
you learned
sales.
from
It's like,
what have you learned from your podcast? Like, what has been like some of the biggest entrepreneurship lessons you learned from the guests on your show?
oh my God. I mean, one of my biggest questions is about what they carry with them all the time. And sometimes they're surfacey, they're like, and that's a big question. So people don't remember that I gave you that question because you're not supposed to know that one. But yeah, but that question, I get really woo-woo answers that are really deep and philosophical, and then I have ones like my phone. But then sometimes it's my phone, and then it gets philosophical on why it's their phone. And sometimes it's just their phone because they like to play Tetris. And
Yeah.
then I sit there, I'm like, anything else? Anything else more woo-woo? I need something better than your phone because you like to play Tetris.
Yeah.
And it's surprising who comes up with what. When you think you're going to have someone who's going to say like the Tetris game on their phone, and they come up with something very philosophical, and others that are like big names, like my phone, I can't live without it. I'm like, well, that's great, but give me something more. Like, come on, come on, come on, that kind of thing. So,
Hmm. That's interesting. How do you get people to open up like that? Like, because the woo, I guess not everyone's always. You can make your phone very deep. You can say it's my phone because I always want to be on call with my daughter.
yeah,
Calls me randomly. She's 3 years old. She just learned how to pick up the phone and call me, and it just makes my day when they call me. For example, like that's one woo
yeah.
example. But not everyone's willing to share that instantly. Do you have any? Have
I
you
have put
learned?
people at ease. I mean, I went to. I mean, I think I have a benefit. I'm a trained journalist. I was an accredited journalist, a professional journalist for 6 years. So it kind of comes naturally to me to just kind of put people at ease. Like I'm not gonna. I tell people this is not Barbara Walters. This is not Diane Sawyer. This is not 2020. All U.S. Shows and stuff. But I'm not gonna grill you. This is not
Hmm.
60 Minutes. Yeah, this is a surfacey conversation, share insights and stuff like that. It's not hard. It's not gonna be hard hitting journalism. It's a feature story. Essentially, is what it is.
Hmm.
To get to know you, kind of thing.
And there's just as much in it for them as there is for you, right? I guess
Yeah.
that's an important part of it as well.
Yeah, if they did a research, they know it's coming.
Hmm.
A lot of people ask me, can I have the questions ahead of time? I'm like, no. But if you think about it, I do give them ahead of time. Because if you listen to the podcast, you're prepared. You have to prepare that much. Just listen to one episode. Pick a good episode. They all have the same question. Well, if I did my job right that day and I didn't forget one, hasn't happened that much in 205 episodes. I mean, there's been a few where I did one, two, I've done two repeat guests. Or don't repeat guests in 205 episodes. There's been some reruns. I've done a few reruns. But I don't really repeat interview people. But there's two. Zave Smith is doing a new fun My Backyard docu series about around Philadelphia, so I had him on. And Brian Hufford, who's on LinkedIn, he was episode 4. I just had him on. He's coming out in a month. But those are fun because things have changed in people's lives, so it's kind of nice to go back and see what's up and how things have changed. So
100%.
it's constantly evolving.
Ah, have you seen what's been the biggest change you've noticed? Like, have you seen someone go from a nobody to a unicorn or anything like this?
Not that so much, but I've seen a lot of people change jobs or have gone from a side hustle to it now is their main hustle, and they're doing well with it. They're doing good, or they're struggling, but they're keeping their head above water and they're rocking and rolling. And it's nice to revisit every once in a while. So
100%. If you could say there was three things that are vital to your success, Seth, in the podcasting
mhm.
sphere, what would those be?
Persistence, and persistence. No, persistence is definitely one of them. Having kind of a game plan of how you want to go about your show, and then persistence. I honestly have to say it takes a lot of persistence. And organization, actually, those are the three. Persistence, having your show planned out kind of what loosey goosey a little bit, and then having goals, I think is really important. So that was
So,
like 15 reasons, not three, but
what does persistence mean to you? What do you mean by persistence, like concretely for someone starting out a podcast?
it's being regular. I mean, it's really like just sitting down and just doing the podcast. The first three are gonna suck, dude. The first three are gonna suck. Every single one of them were atrocious. Still publish them. Still get them out to the world. Don't hold on to them. Get them out there and go on to the next one. Go on to the next one. Go on to the next one. It's not the BBC. It's not NPR. I mean, you listen to these big name podcasters like Joe Rogan. He's smoking weed on his podcast, for crying out loud. There's nothing serious about Joe Rogan. Now, all the Joe Roganese are going to come after me, but like, there isn't. He's good interviews sometimes. Other times he's a schmuck. So there you go.
It's reps, right? It's number of reps that you're doing.
It's like going to the gym. It's like going to the gym. You just gotta get better at it. I mean, I've been podcasting since 2010, different podcasts. Some have lasted 3 episodes. Some have lasted 6. This one lasted 205. Like, it's amazing.
Yeah. I think that's honestly, it's the same thing everyone says every single time, and we're never going to get sick of saying it because we're being consistent in saying you need to be consistent. The idea of like trying to, like, ideally never missing a week, right? Because you miss 1 week, you miss 2, you miss 3. Not that many people have the ability to be able to bounce back like that, right? And if you can, then great. Yeah. But making sure that you are getting episodes out on a consistent basis.
If you do weekly, do bi-weekly. And if you can do bi-weekly, do monthly. I went to any farther than monthly. I mean, I was doing twice a week because I had so many in the hopper. I was putting them out Tuesdays and Thursdays. And this week is the first one we're going back to just weekly. So I made an announcement. We're just going back to weekly. Deal with it, people. Like, I can't keep up with that pace. Having twice a week. You know, eventually I'll have a big, backlog and we'll go back to twice a week. You know, it's because I don't want to have things go stale. So at one point they were going through like 5 months worth. I had a 5-month runway, and that was ridiculous. I started putting out, Thursday episodes. So it was like, these have to get out, otherwise they're gonna be really stale, and it's not fair to anybody.
100%. So and it consists. So you said persistence. You said organization. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. It's having a spreadsheet. Honestly, I have something in Notion where I'm constantly updating. Like, I did this show, it's on editing, it's where is in the process, staying organized, knowing what shows are coming out next week. Don't just record and say, oh, let's look it out whenever it gets out. No one's going to listen to your show.
Having a process, so that's really good.
Yes.
And then, what was the third one that you said as well? So you said it was persistence.
The persistence is going to be key, but organization, and I really do think it's persistence. I think it's persistence internally. It's persistence. The first one's persistence outwardly to get the people on the show. The other one's persistence with yourself to know that you've got to keep this up to date. You've got to rock and roll with it and stuff like that. It's internal persistence. Stay on top of yourself.
100%. So I think that's the organization element's interesting. Not many people have brought that up. I think that's probably just, I guess, part and parcel. It needs to be there. But back to the persistence point where you said about, look, the first 3 are going to suck. I argue more than my first 3 sucked. You're doing really well.
I was being kind.
It's just your first 3.
Podcasting for a while. Yeah.
Yeah. But they're going to suck. But the beauty of it is as well, no one's listening to the first 3 either.
No,
right?
No one listens to them. And do a trailer. Do a trailer. Put that up there first. That, nice buttoned up trailer. Then you have the first 3 or 5 that suck, whatever, they're in there. You go back eventually and listen to them like, oh my God, that was atrocious.
100%.
The first one, Digital Marketing Dive, is out there. It was an echoey room, bad audio. Oh, it was awful. It's up there. If you want to go look at Digital Marketing Dive on MPN, marketingpodcast.net, it's up there somewhere. I haven't taken it down. I won't. It's history. I mean, a lot of my podcasts, when I'm done hosting them on with it now Jason, hosts the server or Megaphone and all that. But like the past podcasts, when I take them off the RSS feed eventually and retire them, I put them on archive.org. I give it to the archive and say, hey, here's all my shows. So I have my podcasts archived with Bruce Raquel because I'm like, it's history. If you don't put it up there, it doesn't exist anymore. Or it does, and nothing on the internet goes away. But like, you can control your quality if you put your own stuff up there.
Yeah, I mean, we also find that. I mean, usually the first episode's one that's gonna have the most downloads long term, because like so much of podcasting is just long tail. Like that podcast stays up, like you said, And then a lot of the time, people, when they come on your show, they go to episode 1 and they go and look at what episode 1 was.
It's so unfortunate.
You wish they wouldn't. And you hope they don't judge you on episode 1. And they listen to hopefully the newest episode, and then maybe they go check out episode 1. But then they realize, okay, you've had a journey in there. And then they kind of see, okay, there's definitely a journey in there, progression. You upgraded your mic. You figured out that you need to sit a little bit further back or a little bit further forward. You realize how to get rid of echo. We do a lot of post-production to fix up the sound now. We didn't do that with episode 1 to 100, let's say. All these different things. I mean, me and Guillaume have a story where for our main podcast, or our first podcast, Corporate Treasury 101, the first... We didn't know how to record everything, right? But Guillaume had this like...
look at you now. Look at you now.
Yeah, exactly. Guillaume had this lapel microphone. I don't know what from. And it was 2 of us in a room. We were both in Belgium at the time. And we said, okay, we put the laptop in the middle. We clipped the lapel mic here on the computer, plugged it in, and then started recording with GarageBand, which is the free recording software on MacBooks. And so we started going. We did the first recordings. I think we got to like episode 7 before we realized that there was a setting in GarageBand to select the mic, and we weren't using that microphone. We were using the laptop's built-in microphone the entire time. And so we were like, oh, that's there now, let's start now. And I think it's when we upgraded our mics. We actually got these mics here, and we plugged them in, and we were like, wait, this sounds the same. What's changed? Why is this not working? And then we realized we hadn't selected the microphone. So indeed, now those first 10 episodes, however long it was, they're there up. They were passable. Let's say you can hear us, but it was it was a journey.
It's always a journey, buddy.
It's always a journey.
That's the fun of it. It's a journey.
Awesome. Seth, thank you so much for being on the show. But tell me, before we close, we started doing this thing where we ask podcasters to give shout outs to other podcasters in the space that they think are doing a great job. So if you had 3 podcasts you'd love to shout out to, either people you know, ideally, or just great shows that you love listening to that you learn from, what would they be?
Well, Ian Truscott's is great.
He's a past guest of the show.
Rockstar CMO, it's great. I love it. It's also the British accent, the British Scottish accent. You can't go wrong with a British or Scottish accent. They're different, but they're still different from us stupid American accents. His is really good. I like the morning stream. It's like a talk show. It's hosted by Scott Johnson and Brian Ibbett. It's every single day. They live stream it. They're professional podcasters. That's what they do. They have Patreon out there, and you pay, you got no ads and stuff. It's worth it. The Daily Tech News Show is hosted by Tom Merritt of CNET fame. He was kind of big on the tech world, so I subscribe to his stuff. And one more bonus one, Jason Falls is Winfluence. There's a book that goes with it, but Jason Falls is a Kentuckian through and through. He's got the twang, and he is a hoot. Oh. He makes you smile. He's this big dude with a big beard, and he's just lovable. You want to hug him. I've actually hugged him before, so he's very huggable.
I wish for the day I can hug Jason. We had Jason on the show. We had Ian on the show. They're both great, indeed. So 100%. Seth, appreciate you a lot, and thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Amazing.
Thank you for listening to the B2B Podcast Stories. We hope you enjoyed the show, and if you did, please don't forget to hit subscribe and check us out at ghamarketing.com. Have a great day.